I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the world's most influential basketball podcast. I am Ben Detrick. Jordan Redaelli remains on vacation. And Andrew Kuo, as usual, takes no days off.
Yeah, I'm not stepping out of the house for the next 2 months, too. I'm terrified of all these flu germs going around, man. Have you been protecting yourself against the winter onslaught of illness?
My mom told me to get a flu shot so many times. So many times. And now I have the flu or a cold or some sort of ailment.
Apologies if Ben sounds a little hoarse.
So here's
today.
my thing. Obviously, we're going to talk about Kobe Bryant. Mm-hmm. And if my sniffles add emotional gravitas to any of these discussions, feel free to interpret it in that way. I'm not offended, and we're going to talk about some tragic shit.
Take that whisk crown, sire.
But I will say, yes, I have a case of the sniffles. Let's just leave it at that, and let's not let my mom be right about the flu shot that never was.
Wait, before... What are the things that moms are always right about that we think they're wrong about? I always have a list like, my mom told me to speak more than one language. I was like, I don't care. I just want to play Nintendo. My mom told me I would regret not sticking to piano or to the violin. I was like, whatever. This is a guitar. She was right.
Was she?
Oh, my God, yes. I wish I spoke Spanish, and I wish I spoke a couple different dialects of Chinese.
Well, that's true. The different language would be excellent to have. I wish I could speak any other language besides English and a terrible version of Spanish, which is basically like, is there a bathroom close to here?
Oh, that's not bad. You're the Mexico City king, so...
Yeah, I mean, I can get around a little bit with Spanish, but I can't have a engrossing conversation by any means. But was she right about the musical instrument?
Absolutely.
Because if you stuck around and you played the piano for 12 years, would you use it now? I know a lot of people that did, and they don't.
No, but I wouldn't have to utilize it, but like what access to a different part of my brain that would be, right?
I mean, you can read music, right?
No, I can't anymore. I used to be able to. But, I lost the dexterity of all that stuff. Also, my mom gave me the best advice once when I was trying to like be cool as a young teenager, and I didn't care about money, and I was a budding Bernie bro. And she was like, all this stuff is important, and when you get older, you're going to realize that like fighting against that is a challenge in itself. But she said, you have to create some space for yourself somehow, and that can involve a lot of different things and different mindsets, but always create space for yourself. That's the most valuable thing.
I mean, my mom's most famous saying was, ask not what you can do for your country.
Ask not what vaccines you can inject into your veins.
Did you just sniffle?
Am I already getting wistful?
Sniffled. You just sniffled.
That's it. This podcast is over. I need to take that zinc.
Anyway, get your flu shot, Kuo. Enough of this preamble. Let's talk about what we need to talk about.
Let's do this.
The horrific, tragic death of a top 50 NBA player. Man, here's the thing about Kobe Bryant. My relationship with him is not one of celebrating his greatness. It's of roasting him. And I love Kobe Bryant for roasting. And if it sounds disrespectful, that's not what this is about. I miss roasting Kobe. My relationship with him for decades has been one of pure roasting, making fun of Kobe because he's such a winner, because he's so great, because he's such a hero. So to now sit here and be like, let's remember the greatness of Kobe Bryant, that's not what I want. I want us to go back to like roasting him, man. It's all surreal. I'm sorry.
No. Let it all out, Ben. Roast Master General.
I just want to roast him. I want to call him a tall Eric Gordon. You know, I don't want to deal with Kobe as this incredible spectral figure of basketball greatness. I want to shit on him.
Yeah.
'Cause that's what you do to things that you love, right? You roast them.
Right. I mean, I'm steadfast in my take on him. I didn't like him as a player. I didn't like his NBA personality. I don't like how he challenges young players to be like him. I find him condescending and arrogant.
Yeah,
And
that's what I'm saying. Roast him.
But I miss him so much, and it's just fucking tragic, man. Apologies to our kids listening, but like, for the language, I just don't understand. So I still don't like him as a player. I still don't like him as a personality. I am shook. I do not know how to process this information.
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't feel real in any sense of grief, in part because the way that we're processing the Kobe Bryant loss is if he was either an active player or he was someone that was playing ages ago. He was neither. And that's why I think this feels odd, because Kobe has been so present in arguments, in memes, in being a commentator, in putting out a movie, and
In our zeitgeist, he was an important person in American culture.
and we just went through the Kobe retirement tour a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And we talked about the complexities and complications of Kobe Bryant and his greatness and his personal life and all these different elements. We've done this, and all of a sudden we're doing it again, and it's tied to this awful tragedy in which 9 souls lost their life. And it doesn't seem, the timing just seems so strange. It's not like, oh, remember him. No, of course I remember him. We just did this.
Yeah, exactly.
But he's also not a current player in that way of, like, he's not on the court. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's very difficult to process this. I know that's a vague way of describing this tumultuous moment, but I think that's why I find it disorienting.
I agree, and I still can't really wrap my head around it, and I always come back to it feels out of place, like this is not the order of things. And I always chuckle to myself because there was a hit horror movie series just about this called Final Destination, you know? But I always thought that was such a compelling idea when these deaths happen to whoever it may be, and people are comparing it to other shocking events, and that's the way we have to make sense of it. I think when we were talking about it originally, when it happened with our good buddy who's on vacation, you know, we didn't know what to make of it, so we maybe leaned into TMZ or the vehicles and the mechanisms in which these things happen. And it's just a way to express shock and anger. And if you want to compare this to other shocking things, do it. If you want to get mad at TMZ for doing their job, do it. If you want to get mad at people not mentioning the other victims as much, go for it, because this is something, death should not make sense to the living.
Well, what we're talking about is the natural futility of doing anything about death. And whether it's arguing about the logo of the NBA or players giving up their numbers or holding the ball for 24 seconds or being mad at TMZ. These are just like futile gestures, right? Mm-hmm. It's us just waving our arms helplessly and coming up with things that feel as if we have minor degrees of control.
Right.
Because we have none.
Yeah. And I think the most important things are like your family. Your living is the most important thing, and your family. But I was really, the forest view of this was, I was so grateful for him being a villain and enacting this this kind of theater. Celebrities do this, athletes do this, musicians do this, who are all celebrities. But I felt grateful that like we were given the opportunity to frame something so like in the recesses of our mind, in the way we talk about death. And like if you don't like sports, and if you don't like Kobe Bryant, if you don't like the Lakers, all these things, you're going to come at it with through a different lens. But I think these are the stories. I mean, I sound like a Hallmark card, but these are the stories that define our lives, and this tragedy is going to define our life in a way.
And that's what I mean when I say I want to roast him.
Yeah.
Because the defining characteristic of Kobe, to me personally, as opposed to, say, a Lakers fan or, you know, any other kind of basketball fan that would differ from me, is that he was always the villain. He was the villain against Shaq. He was the villain against AI. He was the villain against LeBron James.
Dirk Nowitzki.
T-Mac. Like, you name someone, Kobe was always, in my eyes, the evil empire in comparison to my hero. And I can only interpret him as the Sith Lord of basketball. And that's how I want to remember him. And that's out of respect. That's not out of disrespect. I want to think of him as this pillar of evilness in a way. And I'm not referring to like morality. I'm talking about of opposition to everything that I stood for. And he was the one who always got to win. And he was the one who got 6 rings. And he was the one who won MVP against Chris Paul. Yeah. And like, that's how I can think of him. Because it's such an abrupt departure for me to say, yes, the beloved Kobe Bryant, who I always respected and liked. No, he was the paragon of opposition. And I want to remember him adequately and accurately in that regard.
And it's important to that point. It's important to be kind of aware of what we're doing when we watch a movie or we watch a game. Star Wars doesn't exist without Darth Vader, you know, and this is like nerds have written about this in the 90s about, you know, wrestling, and there has to be an obvious villain in order for the hero to mechanically exist. And Kobe was that for me, and he existed in the era of West Coast, East Coast beef. You know, if you were into
100%
rap, and like Kobe would come to town in his gold and purple, and we'd be like, this guy in Death Row Records is the enemy. You know, we're Patrick Ewing, we're AI, we're East Coast, we're Bad Boy Records, you know? And it was just a way to talk about a thing. We didn't really, I mean, I had all the Snoop Dogg records. I had all the Dr. Dre records. You know, I enjoyed this thing, but it was comforting to be able to slot yourself into a point of view. And I'm really grateful for LeBron did this when he took his talents to South Beach. He presented himself as a way to inhabit this world and to participate in this world. And he became the villain. And it made me really grateful not only to be alive and have family and friends, to be on Cookies Hoops, but like, thank you, LeBron James. Thank you, Chris Paul. Thank you, Carmelo Anthony. I'm very grateful for these people in my life. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. And also, just going back to what I was saying before, viewing Kobe as a villain does not mean that we don't like him, because we all watched No Country for Old Men, and like Antoine Chigurh is an incredibly engaging character who you love to watch, but he is without question the villain. Mm-hmm. And Kobe was a complicated character in a way that MJ was as well, but we found out later.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Kobe, we found out how chafing and complicated and complex and annoying and narcissistic he was in real time. And I think it makes him far more human than an athlete like Tracy McGrady. I don't know anything about him. I don't think about Tracy McGrady, even though he was an incredible basketball player. Yeah. Grant Hill seems like a great guy, completely uncompelling.
Well, this is the thing, right? Like the Blazers are pretty good. I have no thoughts on the Bucks or Blazers, but the Knicks are awful, and I can talk to you about them for a whole night. It's the story, and I think Pablo Torre on ESPN said it in a way that I really appreciate. And he used the word multitudes a lot, and how anti-heroes exist in storytelling, and those are the most compelling people. And the idea of redemption on the court and redemption in your life, it's a complicated story. And shout out to Tracy McGrady and shout out to Grant Hill, who are awesome people. But you're right, I don't quite think about them in the same way.
No, not at all. They're completely different.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think in general, Kobe was far more interesting and than these other athletes, because we saw this early veil that he had constructed around himself fall apart, and he emerged from this cocoon of the boy next door who's also spoke Italian and went to the prom with Brandy and was this, and we saw him for what he was, like an egomaniacal force of nature. Mm-hmm. And that what was different about Kobe, and it was similar to MJ, is that he viewed a team sport as a vehicle for personal greatness. And that is a contradiction that inherently leads to fraughtness.
Yeah.
It's not like tennis. You're out there with 4 other guys. You have 12 to 14 guys on your roster, and you are viewing it through the lens of me.
Yeah.
And that was Kobe, in a way that I wouldn't say any other superstar has been as explicit.
Yeah, and it's funny, all these stories that people are retelling now about how, he, after a bad Lakers loss, he threw away everyone's Kobe shoes and said that, they're not. I'm like, he's a jerk. He's always been a jerk. And I don't like Mamba mentality. I think that's an old American idea that makes people unhappy. Like, if you're not a sociopath worker, then what are you doing? I'm like, let's get rid of this. Like, I'm very happy that the Zoomers are here, and they kind of bristle against the Mamba, the Kobeisms that he talked about. Nevertheless, highly influential, very American ideas. Like hard work, insanely hard work gets you success.
Let's talk about that for a second, because Kobe successfully made the mythology of himself one of hard work, and one of
and loyalty
and desire, loyalty, etc. But mainly it was wanting it more.
Yeah.
That's literally what Mamba mentality means. Wanting it more than the next player, wanting it more than your teammates, wanting it more than the guy you're lined up against. You just want it more. And to be clear, Kobe played through terrible injuries. By all accounts, he was the hardest working guy in the locker room. At times, it may have been performative when he would trot out, into the arena with media around after a game and shoot.
Kobe, a cop. He was a cop.
He was a cop. Kobe made it clear that he was working harder than everyone.
Yeah. He manufactured that whole thing. Yep.
And that's why it's weird, because we've always sort of made fun of this idea of Mamba mentality. And now it's being spoken of in reverent terms, as if it's an actual thing. And I can only sort of smile and be like, Kobe did it again. He came up with this bullshit phrase, Mamba mentality. You don't come up with your own nickname. He named himself the Black Mamba. He just came up with it.
It worked.
He named his own mindset Mamba mentality. Like, what a hoax. It's so good. It's so good. And now we're like, well, the one thing you got to remember about Kobe Bryant is that he had the Mamba mentality. He just wanted it more. And you're like, motherfucker. Like, you after like 20 years, you're still getting me? You're still under my skin with your bullshit? Yeah. Like, advantage Kobe forever.
I know, because I definitively side on the Corey Brewdog. Sometimes you run out of talent at the rim, and I think that's my life view. It is anti-Mamba mentality, and I get I feel sad for people who put that pressure. Remember when Kobe challenged everybody? Like, I challenge you to lead the league in rebounds. I challenge you to shoot more 3-pointers than you did last year. I'm like, get out of here, man. Like, let these people just do however much they want to do. And maybe Kobe did want it more, but that's a skill.
But also this. Kobe was in the NBA at like 17 years old. Mm-hmm. Are we suggesting that he was in the NBA because he wanted it more at 15? Or because he was a child prodigy in basketball?
He was gifted. It's a skill.
That he was 6'6" in high school and could jump out of the building and had a father who was an NBA player, and he developed an incredible polished skill set as a kid. Was that Mamba mentality? Or was he just an awesome basketball player? And when you see him pulling off 360s in games and dunking on people's heads, is that because he wanted it? Or because he was a ridiculously good athlete with great basketball IQ and polished skill set? All these things that we now attribute to hard work and desire. Man, that guy was a fantastic basketball player, even if he didn't want it at all.
Yeah, and these are all ingrained American ideas. Every politician has to say they came up from nothing. Even the current president is a self-made man all of a sudden. I'm like, no, you had opportunities that no one else had, and you got here, which is fine. This is the way the world works. But Kobe shifting the perception of him to a self-made man is interesting because, like you said, he was given many advantages genetically. I think, the will to achieve what you want to achieve is a skill and not something that you can create out of nowhere. And he was born with all these things, and he was very successful. But why not as successful as Tommy Heinsohn? Why not Bill Russell?
Well, here's
Casey Jones.
Here's the question. At this point, while we're talking about Mamba mentality and this infamous way of approaching life in the game of relentlessness and achievement, did it ultimately do him a disservice? I don't know. I'm asking you. No,
I think it served him very well. Like you said, beyond our world, he's still getting W's. I think it served him very well. And he was a master storyteller as well. And I think certain celebrities and certain just people in your lives, if they can frame their thoughts in compelling ways, like those are the people we want to be around, right?
Because in comparison to T-Mac, who I think was better than Kobe for several years while they overlapped in their prime.
T-Mac was a nuclear weapon for
T-Mac was outrageously good and probably used the wrong way, where they decided that he should be a 2 guard versus a 4, but that's a different conversation. But if you ask someone what the difference was between those two, they would probably say, Kobe's a winner and he wanted it more. Yeah. And that would be the difference between T-Mac and Kobe. Maybe it's true. Maybe
that's
it's
plausible.
Accurate.
Yeah.
Maybe it was circumstance. I don't know. But that's what will be written forever in the history books. That Kobe wanted it more and was a winner.
And I hate to start counting things in such an awful situation, but I think with the people who talk about Kobe are presenting counting stats. It's like he has 5 rings. He wanted it more. He has more W's. And if you look on the list of great players, Tom Satch Sanders had 8 championships. He was 8 for 13 in his career. And it's all I find myself kind of grasping at straws to try to frame I said this the other day that kind of got an odd reaction. Kobe was one of the most important Americans to ever live. And, I say that a bit loosely about, Bernie Sanders or these politicians who are in our mind. Like, I know who Bernie Sanders is. We talk about Bernie Sanders. He's a presidential candidate. He's been an important part of the government, Congress for forever. But I can't name you 5 other guys, Like, certain people have this gravity. And why doesn't Jim Loskatoff, who has 7 championships, get talked about in this way? And Kobe's black, and he achieved something in a time where we were talking about race more than ever, and he was the chosen one. I think that's what Phil Jackson said. And to see him achieve in a way, in the fashion that he did, that Allen Iverson didn't do in the same way, was pretty astonishing. And he was not a man who looked like Shaquille O'Neal or Patrick Ewing. He was the Michael Jordan 2, and everybody would say, I think I can do that in a small way. And then you stand next to Kobe like, oh my God, you're ginormous. Like, you are 3 feet taller than anybody else in my life.
What's the alternate timeline in which Kobe goes to Charlotte?
Or New York. Remember, he was trying to trade his way to New York?
I wonder.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking about this the other day with Carmelo Anthony and how we view him kind of as a loser.
Suckers view him as a loser. We don't.
Agreed.
Cookie Scoops does not do that.
Hell no, that's a king.
Yeah, he did it.
But if he had gone to Detroit, he would have won a national championship at Syracuse and likely won a NBA title in his rookie year, and then likely gone back to the finals in his second year, even if he loses in the same way. And all of a sudden, we're talking about him as Winnie McWinnington, the guy who just wins. You put him on a team and you win. And the whole conversation with him versus LeBron would have been so different for like a decade. But he didn't. He went somewhere else. If Kobe doesn't go to LA, which has a fantastic organization with Shaquille O'Neal, and the rest of that team was good. I mean, you had Eddie Jones and Nick Van Exel and Eldon Campbell, and you had all these good players.
Vladi.
Well, he went to Charlotte for
Right, for the trade, right?
Yeah. But that's what I'm saying. If he was in a different situation, maybe he doesn't get that taste of a championship early on and realize what that can do for his legacy overall. And all of a sudden, he's just an incredible player, but he's T-Mac.
Yeah.
But if we think of Kobe and who he was, we almost don't think that would have happened. And I kind of agree with that also. Like, Kobe would not have stood for that shit.
Yeah. And
he really did care.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's an interesting point you bring up because, going to the prom with Brandy, being a savant, a genius at what you care about the most, shapes you. And then early success, even before the NBA, just getting to the NBA is success. It shapes the way you view the world. And, I wish Kobe was alive today, and I'd love to be a fly on the wall in a conversation with him and Carmelo, whose lives took very different paths but started the same way. And, we get to this point in our lives where things kind of out of your control shape the things you think you controlled. And you're right. I think the Lakers organization was so sound and so smart, and then they got Kobe Bryant, and it shaped the way he told his story. But the owner was smart, the GM was smart, they identified the right players. After Shaq left, they got Pau Gasol, who was unbelievable, who's unsung. They got Lamar Odom, they had Phil Jackson. He had all the opportunities to succeed, but he had to frame it in his mind as a competitor that he was the alpha dog.
Look at the difference in the way that guys like Carmelo and LeBron sort of came of age and became NBA stars. And one of them went directly from high school. One of them played in college. But in both situations, these are guys who were cool. They had friends. They were prom kings. They were the man.
Yeah.
And they had their circle of friends that they brought with them. And LeBron is still surrounded by the same guys from Cleveland and Akron that he grew up with.
Yep.
LeBron and Carmelo are extremely comfortable in their own skin. And I think we'd be remiss to talk about Kobe without realizing what he came through as a black kid who grew up in Italy, then an Italian kid who grew up outside of Philadelphia, and then as a 17-year-old, a child brought into the NBA surrounded by adults. He had a very different path than those other guys. He was an outsider. And when we think of Kobe, to call him friendless is not fair. But he was a lone wolf. He never struck you as, and this could be wrong, it could be perception, but he never struck me as someone who fit in with his teammates or had like his crew. Again, I could be wrong, but he never came off like that, at least publicly, in the way that Iverson, Carmelo, LeBron, the other superstars of his era did.
Mm-hmm. And there was that infamous practice where I believe it was Mitch Kupchak, and in front of his entire team, he asked Mitch Kupchak to get him more help, which I thought was a bold move. And by choice, he kind of had to motivate himself as the lone wolf. And it's funny to see his second act as an ambassador of the game. And the stories coming out recently about how he would reach out to all these players and touch base with them, I think was something that made this especially heartbreaking because he had changed a little bit.
I agree with that. I don't know from personal interactions, but I think that makes sense. That he became, a six-time champion. He was comfortable in who he was. He was respected by all. And in that case, he was able to mellow out, perhaps.
Well, he has 5, right?
Is it 5 or 6?
He's got 5. He doesn't have as many as Jordan. Come on, get on the internet.
Sorry. I don't care about rings, man. You could have told me he had 7. I'd be like, are you sure? I don't care. I don't care about rings.
Are you disrespecting Frank Ramsey, Mr. 7?
What does Robert Ory have? 12? I just
7.
Green 6. Whatever. I don't care.
Sam Jones 10, buddy.
Bill Russell, the Stromile Swift of his era, has what, 11?
Stromile Swift, rest in peace. Wait,
Anyway.
is Stromile Swift dead? Did I just kill Stromile Swift? No, he passed away, right? He's alive?
No, he's alive.
Okay. I'm thinking of Eddie Griffin. My bad. I love those type of players, man.
But Kobe, all right, well, so let's talk a little bit about, we talked about him mellowing out in his old age, and it seems to be the case.
41, yeah.
I mean, more when he was in his grumpy later days in the NBA.
So
and he
grouchy.
became a curmudgeon, a complainer. He was kind of mean, but I think that is when he kind of opened up to his fellow players, when he became the real talk express. Mm-hmm. And I liked that Kobe. That Kobe was entertaining.
Kobe's never not been entertaining, but for sure that version of him was fascinating too.
But we have not talked about Colorado at all, and I feel as if it was weird to bring it up right after he died, but it was also weird to ignore it. And it was part of his story. And when we talk about Mamba mentality, that was an alter ego created specifically after that event. And it was not a character that was sorry. It was not a character that was about remorse. It was more about anger and and exclusion and relentlessness. But I also think if you take someone's life to recall them by their lowest point, by their darkest hour, the worst thing they've done, often flies in the face of what we believe about being progressive and the criminal justice system, where we certainly believe that rehabilitation is possible, that becoming a better person is possible, that learning from your mistakes and changing are the ideal ways to come away from the darkest moments of your life. I don't know if Kobe did, but I'm willing to acknowledge that it's possible.
And that's I keep on saying this, and because I believe it to be true. I think redemption is a deeply American idea, and if this country was kind of founded on a certain religion, maybe, I think it's really important. It's an important story in the way we think about each other in this country, and all the good stories are about redemption. If the character doesn't change, you don't care about it. Everything changes. If you just stand in one place, something will happen. And not to acknowledge what people go through is tough, especially when they're famous. And I think this word gets thrown about. And people stop saying this word empathy as much, but for a while we were talking about empathy, and I always found it to be kind of fraught with complications because to be better and to put yourself in someone else's shoes, or to ask of yourself to think bigger than your own world, can be handled in so many different ways. And I think being better is something Kobe was really obsessed with, and being a family man and being a great father to his daughters and a great husband to his wife. And sometimes the reaction that I see after the Kobe death is, mentions all these instances that maybe he wasn't who people wanted him to be at all times. And I think the Mamba mentality of us as fans should be we should want to be fair more, instead of I'm going to be better and I'm going to go after the things I think are bad. I think the proper way to frame it is I'm going to be better. I understand the complicated nature of this world.
I don't think we should whitewash what happened in Colorado. And obviously I'm talking about the sexual assault allegations and the lawsuit. Let's not be obtuse. That's what I'm talking about. That is mentioned. It is part of his story. It is acknowledged. And we have brought it up and acknowledged it during his victory lap. And there were times when it seemed strange that a guy who had this incident in his past was up on stage getting an Oscar during the Me Too moment. That was weird. There was something amiss about that. But I also don't think it needs to be the first thing we bring up when he dies. And when people were like, I think it's cool that he died in a helicopter because he's a rapist. And you're like, you know what? That's not cool. That's some weird binary shit that I'm not down with. I can't look at a man's life and say, you know what? I have no feelings for him because he did this thing. Because as I said, I believe in redemption. I believe it's possible to get better.
I think
it's complicated.
Yeah.
It's complicated.
I agree, and I think sometimes the easiest story to tell is the story of hypocrisy, and the way we talk about how people in our eyes are contradictory to the way they present themselves. And I think it takes a bit of growing up to let that go. I'm not nearly there yet. I just see the finish line, but with the way I look at politics and the way I judge my friends and myself, I mean, we talked about hypocrisy last time, and it's such an easy thing to go down. Like, well, you said that, but then you said that. To grow up is to realize that people change, and people can change their minds, and it's not always for the better, and it won't always agree with you, but everything's constantly changing, and for things to go snap back the way you want them to, I think is a youthful, wonderful idea, but it doesn't work as soon as you kind of see that there's more trees around the tree that you're looking at.
I also think it's totally fair for people to say, I don't like Kobe Bryant because of Colorado. I don't feel anything by his death because of Colorado. I think those are justifiable positions to hold. I also think that making that your talking point right now is insensitive and is about you. It's about you trying to make a statement, and it's not about a man with a family and his daughter and 9 people dying.
I mean, the interns haven't been able to kind of function since this news. It's right. As soon as you realize it's not about us, it's like deeply, deeply, for lack of a better word, it's just sad. And I think you're right. We find out what we think internally. We only tell the stories that we are thinking about. So I will see an event, and I will have a predisposition to, let's say, analytics or numbers. And I'll just look at it through those lenses because those are the things I want to talk about because I'm thinking about those things. But somebody who speaks in terms of feelings and vibes, they'll talk about that. And we, in moments of like in these moments where there's a distinct marker in our culture, in our society, we talk about the stories that we want to talk about, and I just hope there's the storytellers who get to frame this man's incredible life have the ability to tell the right story.
So I have a story about Kobe, and it's not the right story or a great story, but it's the only one I have. It's the only personal anecdote I have about Kobe Bryant. So I'm going to tell it. Do not have high expectations for this tale.
This better be good, man. Do not disgrace this man's legacy with your story.
It's not a good story. So about 5 years ago, I was brought on to interview Kobe for a project in which we were more or less harvesting his audio. We wanted him to speak about his sneakers and about passion and about relentlessness and, you know, Kobe things. But I was there just to guide him through it. I would ask the questions, he would answer, I'd give a follow-up, he'd answer, and we were just recording the whole thing. So it was not a hard-hitting interview. They just wanted someone who was used to interviewing athletes to knock it out. And that was my job. So I'm out in LA in this big sort of studio space hangar, and he's there, and he's going through the motions of a media day where he's being interviewed by magazines, websites, blogs, you name it. You know, he's being interviewed all day long. And there was even a guy who was like a Kobe imitator who was walking around the place so you could put him like in your scene, in your set for your photographer before Kobe got there so you would know what it looked like. It was like a guy who was like 6 feet tall that just looked a lot like Kobe and was wearing Kobe style clothes. It was really weird. And I don't know how the height juxtaposition would affect it, but anyway, it was weird. You'd seem like, oh shit, Kobe's here. Like, it's not Kobe. That guy's 5'11". Anyway, so I'm interviewing him about, you know, pretty benign things. And I asked him a little more pointedly. I was like, are you sure it's healthy to be like relentlessly driven on everything? And before that, he had just been giving me these very stock, casually friendly answers that I'm sure he'd been giving out multiple times over the course of that day. It's very polished. And on that one, he looked at me and paused and kind of squinted and was like, well, yeah, I guess if you're fine with being mediocre. And I looked at him and he was like, and then he snapped back to being like friendly. He was like, you're right. You know, maybe I could be a little less driven. And I was like, no. I saw the Mamba.
Yeah.
I saw the actual Mamba, like the friendly, you know, guy who was doing brand interviews, knocking out media things, just getting it all done. I saw the veil slip for a second. It was Serpentor. I saw the Mamba, dude.
Isn't it
and he called me mediocre.
Isn't it interesting that we associate this Mamba mentality with success and not being mediocre? Because there's only like one Steve Jobs and one Kobe Bryant, and they're kind of similar tenors. But we never talk about the people we know who are so driven and just not good at what they're driven to do, you know? And we all know them in our lives. It's like, I'm obsessed with making this restaurant the best restaurant. I'm like, you're going to close in 2 months. I'm obsessed with being the best painter or being the best writer. It's like, have you been able to publish anything? It's like, no, but soon, you know?
You see it in music, and you see it in writing quite a bit, where people will dedicate incredible amounts of effort and hours to the craft, and it doesn't make them that much better.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the thing about Kobe is like, I've put in a lot of hours in the basketball court, man.
Yeah.
Like, I couldn't do a 360 at any point in my life.
Yeah. Like I sometimes think that aspirational people are not for me. I always think to myself when I meet somebody for the first time and they tell me they're an entrepreneur, I immediately recoil a little bit because the aspirational part of their pitch as a human just is too Mamba-like for my taste. And when you see an unpolished, very unpolished player like Jason Tatum saying, I got that Mamba mentality, I almost wonder to myself that if that's necessary. We all know what you aspire to, but that way of framing it could come back to bite you if you're not as gifted as Kobe Bryant, which he's not. Not many people are.
We also just heard about the Celtics trying to de-Mamba
Right.
Jason Tatum.
Right. And yeah, what's that code for? Being a less selfish player.
Want it less, dude. You've just got to want it a little, like 20%
Yeah.
less. That would be really cool if you could just sort of desire it.
It's
two
like
notches down.
I'm trying to take smarter shots and play more of a team game. I mean, D-Mamba myself.
I don't know, maybe less spinning fadeaways with 17 seconds on the shot clock. Yeah, less Mamba.
Yeah. I mean, players who do that should do that, like Trae Young. But his team is losing a ton of games this year, and he was just in tears about losing. It doesn't always work out. And, you know, Trae Young is an all-star. He is a success. His team probably will never win a championship, these Hawks. He might be classified in Kobe's mind as a mediocre player. He doesn't have any of the hardware, right? Which is ridiculous to me. This is like, of course Kobe loved him. Of course Kobe sees himself in him. But it's an unfair evaluation.
You take crazy shots? Interesting.
Yeah. Oh, they go in?
There's something about me and you being really good at basketball. There's something there.
Yeah, and ex-players are not trustworthy narrators, and the reason why Elton Brand fills his team up with players who look like him. And I don't think that players should frame their own story, and Kobe is probably the most successful of all the players to do that. LeBron has not been able to do that. Jordan has not been able to do that. And down the line. Kobe was not only a genius at isolation basketball, but also telling his own story.
Kobe was definitely a basketball genius.
Yep.
And it was, I don't know if the word I'm looking for here, but he had the basketball IQ to do whatever he wanted. He just had a different goal.
Yep.
When Kobe was taking insane shots guarded by 4 people, it wasn't because he didn't see the floor. He didn't know where his teammates were. He just didn't give a fuck.
Yeah. And
It's very different from LeBron.
Yeah.
And it's very strange that LeBron's willingness to pass to open teammates, especially early in his career, was viewed as a sign of weakness and a complete juxtaposition to, of course, Kobe, who was always going to take that final shot no matter who was on him, and as a result was unsuccessful most of the time because the degree of difficulty was outrageous. But that was viewed as moral.
Yeah, I mean, not to bring up Ben Simmons and the Boston media mafia who gets in the brains of Philly media. Ben Simmons in the fourth quarter saying, "You guys are better shooters than me. You guys can score at will. I'm going to play lockdown defense and pass you the ball right where you want it," is the most amazing basketball player in that situation. But he doesn't drop buckets in the fourth quarter. Therefore, he does not have that Mamba mentality. And I mean,
last night in a meaningless game that had emotional baggage because of Kobe, everyone was kind of scattershot, playing poorly. Simmons told Brett Brown to leave Raul Neto on the court during the second quarter because Neto was on fire, and he ended up scoring 19 in the first half. A totally mature and cool thing for Ben Simmons to do.
Yeah.
To be like, well, look, I've been logging 40 minutes a game. You're on fire. Stay out there. Do your thing, little Brazilian man.
And afterwards, Neto.
People were like, well, some people were like, well, he's a better coach than Brett Brown. Other people were like, he's a beta. You're like, whoa. You're like, what is wrong with you guys? But would Kobe have done that? I don't know. Does Kobe ever say, "You're cooking, I'm a sit"? That's not necessarily the Mamba mentality, but he might have.
When he called out his post-POW team for being bad, I always saw it as his teammates are so generous because they're not going to bristle against him. And it was framed as his greatness overshadows all the other players' non-greatness. But I saw that immediately, not maybe because my boy Jeremy Lin was a part of that team. I saw that as generosity from the community that surrounds Kobe, to let Kobe do his weird thing. And they
Kobe's final season was really nuts. It did dovetail with the Lakers tanking,
yeah.
so it was fine, but it was an odd season. And that's why the eulogizing of him now seems weird, because we just did this. We just went through a full year of Kobe rolling into town, getting a standing ovation, chants of Kobe, chants of MVP, him chucking up some shots, and we kind of just went through it, and we exited that chapter of his life, and he went on to post-basketball Kobe, which is a totally similar character but different. And then now we're talking about all this same stuff again. Colorado and him shooting too much. This is just an overwhelming moment.
I'm still having trouble with it. It doesn't seem like, I mean, death is never timely, but this just seems off time. It's one of those psychedelic moments where your world is kind of changed forever afterwards. And
dude, he had just been passed by LeBron the night before.
We were debating Kobe 24 hours beforehand.
We were roasting him the night before.
Yeah.
It just seems the timing does not make sense. That's what it is. The timing just feels so fucking wrong.
I remember I saw the news on my phone, and the people I was with told me I screamed out loud. I don't even remember. It was crazy.
I just saw some tweets from a few people that were like, no. Are you kidding? No. Can't be. No.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what it was about. And then I kept scrolling upwards, and then I started seeing the TMZ thing getting retweeted. I was just like, wait, what happened? What are we talking about? And I could tell there was this. I was like, are they talking about British soccer? You know, like what is the tenor here? Because you can't tell sometimes.
Yeah.
People being like, oh my God, like, what happened? Was it a football play? Was it a touchdown? You know, I don't know. And just that sinking feeling when you saw it on TMZ and people were like, well, it's TMZ, it's not real. And I always believe the opposite. If it's on TMZ, then it's real.
I mean, they got Lil Wayne wrong, and they got Rick Ross wrong.
That's true.
But
did they say they died or just that they had seizures?
I think the Lil Wayne one, they reported that he may have passed away when he didn't. And then Rick Ross, I believe they exaggerated his heart attack, I believe. But TMZ gets it right, and you're right. And not to go into a media discussion, I think
TMZ is owned by Warner Media. They're not some weird little Hollywood outfit that is unreliable.
Yes.
They are subject to heavy lawsuits. It's Warner.
Yeah.
They're a massive media company.
Yeah. And to vilify them is what we do. And this is what's happening with the election and the last election. Framing the media as the enemy is a way to process things that are hard to talk about. And a lot of people fault TMZ for reporting the death of young children before their family even knows. But who gave them that information? And we are all part of this mechanism. I saw the Kobe alert, and I immediately clicked on it. I didn't wait to see how it would pan out. I was on that thing in a split second. And TMZ knows this, and news outlets know it. And this is the way this thing operates, and it's not always clean. But
well, also, one thing about TMZ is they are not like the New York Times. They will pay you for information.
Hey, man, this happens, right?
I'm not saying there's anything good or bad about it. I'm saying that's why TMZ gets exclusives.
Yeah.
If you call them up with exclusive information, they will immediately pay you.
Yeah.
They will pay you to be first. That's why photos from crime scenes leak on TMZ and not elsewhere, because TMZ pays a lot of money very quickly for reliable information to give them an exclusive, and they will deal with the consequences of that later.
Yeah, and I just rewatched that movie Nightcrawler, that Jake Gyllenhaal movie, and it's a fantastic movie, but I resisted the idea that it was predicting or ahead of its time in any way, because any sort of narrative about our disposition towards gossip, scooping, a shock is gonna feel predictive, but it's just the way we've always been. It's
also like Ouija wasn't zipping around taking photos of crime scenes in black and white when mafioso dudes got their heads split.
Right. And those photos are a document of of history. And man, I heard a particularly heartbreaking account from Ramona Shelburne. She was at the camp, and people were texting her asking if this was true, and she said she was staring at the wreckage. She was like, "I'm standing right here. It is true."
I didn't even know about that. I've kind of intentionally avoided any sort of content that people are like, "This one broke me," or "This one I really felt." I'm like, I don't need it.
But
And it's not because I'm, emotionally cold. I just don't need more of it.
Yeah. I mean, I really look for guidance when this kind of stuff happens, and I really love people who can speak for me and frame my thoughts for me, and I think that's what we're trying to do here. But I've been, I was really happy with the way Pablo put it. I was really happy with the way Le Batard framed it. I look to these people to help me, but I know what you mean. There's no way out of this.
Look, we all have to process this however we want.
Yeah.
And again, if someone wants to process this in a callous way of like, don't care at all, up to you.
Oh, totally fair. Totally fair.
Not everyone has to feel the same way. I certainly don't feel the same way as that unique brand of person that was like a Kobe stan.
Yeah.
A resident of Kobe stan. Exactly.
Yeah.
The people who lived and died with Kobe's every move and idolized him and would sit there and argue with you, even to this day, about how he was better than LeBron James.
I mean,
I'm not one of them, and I feel bad for them because I don't know how they process this.
I agree, and we've both had our fair share of death in our lives if you live long enough in this world, and I've kind of gotten a little cold, admittedly, because it just happens so often that I have to protect myself. But you're right, I immediately thought of my buddies in LA who are friends with him, Kobe, and how they felt, like friend of the pod, Atiba Jefferson, we talked for a little bit, and like, I don't know, Kobe wasn't mine. I can't claim him, like the NBA is ours. This thing that we love is ours, and some people don't care about it, but we care. But Kobe didn't belong to me, and I immediately thought about the people who loved him in a different way, and it just breaks my heart, man.
So on that topic, how do we honor Kobe Bryant? Because we've seen these smaller gestures, like people giving up jerseys, holding the ball for 8 seconds, holding the ball for 24 seconds, writing things on their shoes. What's the NBA's response to Kobe dying? What do we do? There's obviously been talk about putting him on the logo. It seems as if players, or at least many of them, may kind of retire both 8 and 24 from use on every team or on most teams or whatever. What do you think is the appropriate way to honor the life and death of Kobe Bryant?
I think the first game where they took that 24-second violation was really heavy, and watching that was really emotional. And then it loses its impact, and we're trying to figure the more teams that did it, and we're trying to figure out a way to talk about this and symbolize our grief. I think changing the logo is a bad idea. I think the NBA is not Jerry West.
Why are you opposed to changing the logo?
Just emotionally,
the Mamba.
I'm against it because that logo is not Jerry West. To me, it symbolizes the entire idea and mission statement of the NBA. And to change it to a tragic and complicated character makes it different. But if you consider the logo as Jerry West, I mean, change it as much as you want. I don't mind. But I just think a logo has to exist for its function. It represents a larger idea.
I agree. I think the idea of changing a internationally recognized logo to honor a former player, no matter how great he was, is kind of self-defeating.
Yeah, and
you can honor him in any sort of way, but it's also Kobe Bryant, who, as you said, has baggage. It's a no-win for the NBA.
Yeah, and
from a brand identity standpoint, from a controversy standpoint. There's literally no upside if you're the NBA to changing the logo to a guy who just died.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing that is proposed and gets 2 million signatures 2 days after Kobe dies.
Yeah, as many votes as Pascal Siakam got for All-Star. But also, a part of my brain says, who cares? Just change it. Things change. And when people say, we can't change college sports because this is the way we've done it, I'm like, just change it. It's not the sunset. It's not the tides.
But you can't change it to Kobe.
I think it's a terrible idea.
You can't. It's impossible.
It's an awful idea. And I don't even think you should retire his numbers. You should wear his numbers with pride.
I agree.
You should give your best player 24 if you believe in it. I don't
because this to me strikes me as yet another example of the overinflation of Kobe, and Kobe just beating me again, like ribbing me again, getting me one last time. We're like, what are you talking about?
Yeah,
you're gonna make the logo to the NBA Kobe Bryant?
Yeah,
why?
No,
why? He's like, why? Why would it not be Tim Duncan? Make it Kevin Garnett. Make it Wilt Chamberlain. Oh, it's going to be Kobe? Like, it's just the Kobe guys getting me, like, needling me finally again and again forever. So maybe he should be the logo just because it'll irritate me vaguely, not that much, but it'll just irritate me forever.
How are you going to strip the logo Allen Iverson of his title?
But that's what I'm saying is like, all right, is Kobe a... Best case scenario is that Kobe is a top 10 player.
Best case.
Let's speak with the man who has passed away in the highest regards. Top 10 player, not top 5.
No.
Does that mean that if Larry Bird passes away, he becomes the logo? Like, what's the hierarchy of how you become the logo? And eventually, we just wait until LeBron at age 95 kicks the bucket, and then he becomes forever the logo.
Right. I mean, God forbid anything bad happened to our superstars. But
No, I'm not trying to be macabre here. I'm just more saying, what's the actual hierarchy? Does it have to be a tragic death?
This is what I mean.
Player? What are the vectors of deciding who becomes the logo?
I mean, the Boston Media Mafia would like to submit Len Bias for your consideration. Like,
Reggie Lewis.
Yeah, Hank Gathers. I mean, and Kobe is better than all these players. We never got to see Len Bias. Rest in peace. Eddie Griffin. I think it's Drazen Petrovic. I think we shouldn't change it because we should look at the current logo and think of Kobe. And also, whatever. These things are not important. Change it.
And that's why I am actually speaking more freely, and it's more fun to talk about this kind of nonsensical thing
than
what we were talking about before.
Yeah, I agree. And
it gets me back to my comfort zone, which is roasting Kobe Bryant.
Top 30 player Kobe Bryant.
We're going to put Jamal Crawford as the logo.
Yeah. And
green light Jamal Crawford.
And not to sound disrespectful, but I want to start talking about maybe another way that people are framing this as like eulogizing Kobe in this way is the revenge of the boomers too. And
it is. Yes. Go off.
It has all of the markings of the things that they've been preaching for decades about hard work, wanting it more, nerds not knowing anything, analytics being fraught. Their eyes tell you the story that needs to be told. And
it's all, every possible bias is actually Kobe bias.
Yeah, and
it's dribble bias, it's shooting bias because he had beautiful form and footwork. It's crouch bias. He was a solid defender who was, an all NBA defensive player many, many times, if I remember correctly, despite being like an okay defender. But he crouched, he slapped the floor, he snarled at people. Crouch bias all day.
Yeah, Jordan retires.
Rings bias. Kobe is the bias king.
Yes.
He's more biased than Len. Sorry.
Easy.
The logo.
Right, Len Bias, the logo. I think, and nerds and analytics fans are left holding the bag a little bit during this eulogy period because we've been saying, if we include ourselves in that pool, we've been talking about how Kobe is a wonderful player. He was one of the best players of all time, around where Olajuwon stands, around where Barkley sits. Karl Malone is his peer. But if you want to talk about greatness, you have to talk about Kevin Durant, Chris Paul, LeBron James, Michael Jordan. That's another tier entirely. And boomers have been forcing this narrative that Kobe is a part of the discussion with James Harden as an offensive player, but he's not in the same league.
I mean, this is a different conversation, and one that I'm very much into. Is that I do think the guys from the early 2000s get a stigma attached to them for inefficiency that it would be unfair if I applied that double standard. How am I phrasing this? It would be unfair if I defended Allen Iverson against people who screech about his inefficiency if I did not do the same for Kobe Bryant. Mm-hmm. Despite the fact that I love making fun of Kobe Bryant's inefficiency, it's true. He would have been plenty efficient today. Just like all those other guys. You look at the leading scorers, especially the guys who were guards and wings from that era, they're all inefficient as shit. The game was different. Stackhouse, Iverson, Kobe, McGrady. Tim Duncan wasn't efficient. Kevin Garnett wasn't efficient. No one who scored a lot of points back then, except for like Shaq, actually was. It was a different game. There wasn't enough shooting to spread the floor. The changes in the defensive rules meant that you could pack the paint. Guys like Larry Brown were still running prehistoric offenses with Tyrone Hill and Eric Snow and Mutombo and George Lynch with literally zero shooters on the floor. I am very sympathetic to the advanced metrics of guys like Iverson, Kobe, McGrady, etc.
I agree.
Thank you.
I mean, I was waiting for your game-winning Kobe Mamba shot.
Well, the thing is, from that era, the guys who now are efficient were Nash and Nowitzki. I can't remember if Michael Redd was one of them, but before them, Reggie Lewis. The guys who were three-point specialists at a time when there wasn't a lot of three-point shooting. And they were incredibly effective back then. But their efficiency even is not outliery by today's standards.
Right. And
it's just a different game. It was an offensive slump. And we do have to be cognizant of that when we call Kobe and Iverson chuckers. I don't enjoy this. I don't enjoy tying Iverson and Kobe together here, but it's true. You can't say that one was inefficient and the other one wasn't without talking about the time period in which they played.
And every fan base does this. The Boston media mafia would say, rest in peace, Kobe Bryant and Reggie Lewis, which is fair. And the Lakers bias would be, but Kobe has the rings and Iverson doesn't, so therefore his inefficiency spelled a different story. And, Knicks would say Knicks stuff. John Starks won 3 championships for the 3 Bulls he dunked on,
Marcus Morris wants it more than anyone.
Right. He's just a tough guy, finally an enforcer. Rest in peace, Mason. But I think
Marcus Morris, senior.
Yeah. And when B-Ball Reference came out and box plus minus and all these stats, true shooting percentage, kind of devalued Kobe's playing legacy, it kind of snapped back. And the more the community came up with new numbers, he started moving up the ranks again. But this is unheard of because he was moving up the ranks of the third tier or the second tier. He's like maybe a top 20 player now if we look at it closely. And that is no slight on a player. The players that surround him on the all-time list are amazing. They are so good.
The debate about Kobe has always been, how much do you value image? How much do you value hardware? How much do you value awards, titles, things like that? That's always been the conversation about Kobe. And if you're going to make an argument and say, well, I think McGrady is better than Kobe, you're just arguing on, well, I've seen them both play. I think McGrady was better. I think he was a better passer.
For a shorter
defender.
period
He
of
was
time.
Bigger.
Though.
He was a better shooter from the perimeter. Right. But I mean, you're basing it on your feelings.
Yeah. It's never a big man.
To be like, well, Kobe has 5 rings.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Right.
He won X amount of scoring titles. It's Kobe. What are you going to do? What can you tell me?
Right.
And it's always been about these nuances of, do you gauge a player's legacy by what they earned? And to some degree, you have to. Mm-hmm. You just have to, because otherwise
rings are a metric.
Otherwise, it's just all opinion.
Exactly, and it's always interesting how people talk about it, because Kobe has 5 rings, Iverson has 0, but Jordan has 6. Why not 11? And the first reaction from some Kobe fans has always been, why are you a Kobe hater? And my response is always, why do you hate on every other player who has more championships? You hate a lot more players than you accuse me of hating,
It is amazing how Kobe has been the other side of every basketball argument for like the last X amount of years. That if you're under 50, Kobe has dominated basketball conversations, from him shooting air balls as a rookie or whatever his first time in the playoffs was, to his death and arguing about the logo. If you're under 50, for 75% of your life, if not 100%.
I know.
That's why his death is so odd, because he's just been present as a cognizant adult for our entire lives as a foil for our opinions.
Yeah. I mean, he's a cultural landmark now. Like, we're going to be talking about him more and more. And you asked me this question when it happened, and you asked, what are the things you've argued about most in your life? Kobe's up there, but I was trying to think of outside of this. I don't really argue about Trump, because I don't really engage with people who love him, and within sports is made for arguing. Like, this is a simulation that we use to argue about bigger ideas, and that's why we have a talk show about sports. And I argue about policy, but that's not a part of my world. I may have argued about Kobe more than any other thing in my life.
I agree. I think it's Kobe. If you were going to take
and it's lighthearted,
but I mean, it wasn't always lighthearted.
Well, I mean,
I'm saying a lot of the times it was heated.
Oh,
they were like I remember having real arguments, like at friends' apartments, like you're yelling at each other. Like, there was real arguments about Kobe, and there was also rap arguments, like Biggie and Pac, but that was like a specific era. Like Biggie and Pac was like the late 90s, and then they both died and people stopped arguing about them. But that was like a small thing where it was like, that was heated, Biggie versus Pac.
Yeah.
But Kobe versus blank has been going on for our entire cognizant lives.
And it's fun. I say it's lighthearted because, well, I personally, it's sports. It doesn't matter. It's not policy. It's not war. Things that actually matter. And after I never really got heated about it, because after 3 sentences, I'm like, this is just fun. Like, we're arguing about a game, and there's true ideas attached to this game, but it's not personal.
Oh, sure. As we got older and mellowed, much like the Mamba himself, those conversations stopped having the tenor of like aggressiveness and like
wanting to be right. Just argue. That's why I bring up the who has more rings.
Iverson versus Kobe conversations in the early 2000s, like
fun.
Man, that show was fun, but that was not jovial. Like ha ha ha. Let's just troll each other. Those were like arguments.
I don't know who you were talking to, but
streets.
these streets. I don't know. I don't know why.
That shit wasn't just cool beans, bro.
I know I've been accused on Cookies for being a little too mellow, but I don't know. It's fun, man. Like, one of my best friends has been a Kobe ultra fan forever, and our friendship is based off of talking about it and him ribbing me and me bristling against it, and it created real friendship. It's like, Kobe baby, so how you doing? Like, what's going on with you?
What I find incredible is how enduring it is. And I was playing ball at a local gym, and we're shooting the shit, before a game. A couple guys shooting around. This guy I play ball with there. When it starts with an absent conversation about hoops. Oh, did you watch the Clippers game? Last night? Yeah, they're good. Passing some opinions are going, and then all of a sudden they'll say something, and you're like, "Are you a Kobe guy?" Oh, I think he's a Kobe guy. I said, I forget even what it was. He's like, and he's casually unveiling the fact that he's a Kobe guy. He's like, well, yeah, I think there's a pretty good argument for Kobe being the best of all time. You're like, we got a Kobe guy. And then all of a sudden we're arguing about Kobe and LeBron. And now, again, is far more chill. But even this was like a couple months ago where I'm having Kobe LeBron arguments in 2020 or 2019. But point remains, he's been out of the league for 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
Still having Kobe arguments.
Yeah. And I remember you being like, hung out with a Kobe guy today. Did you know that guy that we know is like a Kobe dude? And I knew exactly what you were talking about, and exactly I threw all my biases and preconceptions that way. And I think this death is so sad because it's a loss of a kind of innocence, where we would talk about Kobe as a player and the philosophies that you would apply to defending him or attacking him as a player. And when he dies, the curtain has been drawn. And I think we have to reckon with the idea that we can no longer talk about these things in the same way in life forever. And it's going to change the way we talk about sports, but politics and policy and our neighbors and our family. It sucks to grow up, man. And I just feel bad for the next thing that's going to happen, that's going to affect people the way this thing affected people, because it's sad and there's no going back.
Well, we got away from it from a little bit, but how would you honor Kobe? We've talked about the things that I wouldn't do. And I'm with you. I would not have players give up their numbers. I would not retire 8 and 24 in every single franchise. I would not do that.
Yeah.
I would not change the logo.
Yeah.
What is appropriate?
I mean, in a vibe sense, I think honoring Kobe would be to give Ben Simmons a break, to give Kyrie Irving a break. Let these complicated geniuses live. I think the way we frame these athletes, we should change a little bit. And that's a very hippie, loosey-goosey way to honor some man's legacy. But I think that's
especially someone who would agree with the exact opposite.
Yeah, exactly.
But I like where you're going with this.
Yeah, I mean,
How do you take the most boomer athlete ever and turn the boomer sympathies into non-boomer, into Zoomer behavior? I don't know how you're going to do it, but I like what you're plotting.
I think I learned this through Linsanity. I was just like, oh, this is a lot more complicated and a lot sadder, and we can do better, roasting these athletes for maybe being tired and saying the wrong thing at the wrong time about how the earth is flat. That's a wonderful thing he gave us. We should not roast him for it. But I think the team should give their best players Kobe's number if they want it. Let's honor him that way.
Yeah, I agree, because part of the legacy of number 23 is how great Jordan was, and how much of an honor it was to be LeBron James, who wore 23.
Oh yeah, it's symbolic.
It's a big deal to strip 8 and 24 away from NBA franchises. You can't wear your hero's number.
Yeah.
And again, it strikes me as the things that you come up with 3 days after a heroic figure dies.
Yeah.
Oh, well, let's do it this way. No, man.
Yeah.
If someone is a Kobe Bryant fanatic and he was their hero and they based their life on him and he's this shining pinnacle of basketball greatness, they should be able to wear his uniform.
Yeah, Trae Young, first thing he did was put on number 8. That's the way these players, I think, are leaning. I mean, retiring his number has the right idea. I'm not fighting that. But
I think it just has too much detachment.
I agree.
It'll be sitting in the rafters. That's inert.
Yes.
It's a piece of cloth hanging there. You want people saying, I got 24 on my back, that I'm going to take some turnarounds. I'm going to go 6 of 22 and fuck you up.
And roast all my teammates after a loss and throw away their shoes.
I'm going to snuff Samaki Walker.
I mean, Mitchell Robinson wearing 23 says it all, man. Greatness exudes that number.
No one has brought up one of the smallest, weirdest moments for a couple weeks of Kobe's career. I want to say it was early 2000s. Maybe 2003, maybe 2004. Do you remember when Kobe started punching people on his follow-throughs on jumpers?
Yeah, I do remember.
What a weird thing. He did it like 4 or 5 times. He had never done it before. He did it a bunch, like knotted up Manu, a couple other people, and then never did it again.
That's weird.
I know. Something where he's like, I think people are playing me too close on my jumpers. He almost set a precedent for like the new flagrant foul of stepping beneath somebody.
Right.
Kobe clearly thought that guys were intruding on his space, perhaps subjecting him to injury when he landed, and he started punching them in the face on his follow through.
Super angry player. I remember when Kevin Garnett would punch people in the these nuts when they were looking up for a rebound, and he was a dirty player. And Kobe was known as a dirty player for a while, which was funny. Like when Chris Childs punched him, everyone was like, right. Everyone hates this guy. When Matt Barnes confronted him, I think everybody understood the frustration other players had regarding Kobe and his greatness.
What a legend.
Oh, 100.
Just utterly detestable in many ways, but also incredibly good at basketball. Just
he did it.
That's why we've argued about him more than anyone else on the planet. Over the last 20 years, he has dominated conversations about basketball in a way that LeBron never has. Yeah. LeBron is great. Morons hated the decision and lost their minds over it. Eventually, everyone came around. There are, of course, pockets of LeBron haters, but they're really just Kobe lovers.
Yeah. I mean, Kobe won an Oscar for a short film about how great he is. Like, that's his... It's like, oh, you won an Oscar? What creative project was rewarded in the highest esteem? It's like an animation about how I'm the best.
I don't know. Was it a tale of a diamond dealer on 47th Street who is immersed in a criminal conspiracy? No. It's about me, getting buckets.
Yeah, exactly. How I wanted it more than anybody. But
dude, I miss that guy, man.
I still don't understand, and we joked about him. We've talked about the complicated stuff. I still am trying to process this in real time. This is one of the saddest things outside of my own circle of my friends.
And what I just said, I miss him. It's not true. I said that because I felt like that's what you're supposed to say. I don't miss him because he doesn't feel like he's gone. It doesn't make sense. I don't miss him. I'm not like, oh man, remember Kobe? No, man. Yeah. LeBron broke his record a day before. He was tweeting the night before. We were roasting him the day before. Like, I don't miss him at all. It feels like he's still here.
I mean, he's here more than ever in a way. Like, I went to the post office
still just owning me.
I know. I went to the post office in downtown New York City, and some hero, some Duke was wearing Kobe shorts with tights underneath, a Kobe jersey, and a Lakers hat. And I looked at him and I was like, you look amazing, dude. And he was like, I grew up in New York. I just respect greatness. I'm like, you're a sellout, but I respect it. I respect it. It's like, I wouldn't lend you money, but respect.
I just respect greatness. Like,
I know. It's like, okay. But yeah, he's now he's entrenched in our lives, and we've been around a lot of death. We've been surrounded by death in our community, and if you enjoy the NBA, there's been this story for a while, but this one seems out of place and it feels surreal. It just doesn't follow the rules of this game, which is disturbing to me.
I agree, dude. I don't know. I don't know that this season will seem normal for a while. Even talking about basketball now just is odd. I think that'll wear off in a little bit, as things tend to do. Time heals all. I just remember. I don't know if but I put up a tweet about the Sixers earlier, and I'm like,
yeah. The interns are stuck.
It all feels small.
Yeah, and I don't want to be the conversation shaming guy. People can talk about what they want to, but I've had a tough time a little bit, and these things like you said, wear off, and we'll snap back into roasting Ben Simmons or trading Joel Embiid in our fantasy. But I think there's little marks that are left, and when you gather moss this much, like, it changes the direction of your life. And I think we're gonna move on, and we're not gonna recognize quite easily how we changed, but this has changed us, I think.
Yeah, I wonder. That's an interesting way of putting it.
Yeah, I don't know.
Will we have a different perspective? Does it change the way that the tenor of ferocity towards players? My hunch would be no, but I like the idea that it's yes.
Yeah, and I get roasted all the time because I don't want to hate somebody for who they voted for or what team they're into. Like, I'm just over it. I just can't think about that stuff anymore because it makes me sad and it makes me a worse person in my mind. And, a few weeks ago, we talked about, like, can someone be redeemed? Who's the bad player? What are we born good or bad? And it's so interesting that it takes a long time to figure that out. And
this is just that wistful Joe Biden energy.
That's malarkey, Ben. I mean, I'm a wistful dude, and whatever time to be wistful is right, I don't know. But, man, there's shitty things happen in the world, and it makes me sad.
I think the most common takeaway that I agree with, beyond arguments about how we should honor Kobe and et cetera, is, like, let the people that you care about know that you care about them. Mm-hmm. Because as cliche as it is, life is not promised. And, without getting into personal stuff, we both lost someone else. And not even the same person. Yeah. Literally the same day.
Yeah.
And I felt a little out of grief.
Yep.
Where I just looked at it and I was like, oh, that's someone I knew for a long period of my life who is now gone.
And young people.
And again, I'm not even trying to go there with it.
Yep.
But it hit home in a couple different ways, I guess is what I'm saying.
Absolutely. And I don't know. I don't know what kind of people we're meant to evolve to be. But I have a feeling that sometimes we are what we are, but Kobe Bryant is an example of someone who I think changed, and there's hope there. And the striking down of that hope and that experience of seeing this guy grow up is very complicated and deeply tragic, I think.
Whether he changed or not is kind of less important than the idea that you can.
I agree. Yeah.
Well, that was a Mamba mentality, Mamba forever episode of Cookies. Rest in peace, Kobe Bryant.
Rest in peace, Kobe, and shout out to all of our friends and family and people who listen, man.
Stay safe. Cookies.
Cookies.